Good afternoon. My name is Christian Elia, and I'm the Executive Director of the Catholic Civil Rights League. Along with the St. Joseph Moscati Toronto Catholic Doctors Guild and the Canadian Catholic Bioethics Institute, we are pleased to be providing this session in support of freedom of conscience and religion for physicians, in light of the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario, the CPSO's draft policy announcement, Professional Obligations and Human Rights. This document states that where physicians are unwilling to provide certain elements of care due to their moral or religious beliefs, an effective referral to another healthcare provider must be provided to the patient. This mandate for an effective referral is a violation of a physician's rights, as it compels the physician to violate his or her own conscience by being a participant in the very act, the very procedure to which he or she objects in the first place. This, of course, is made all the more chilling when considering the new regime of physician-assisted death, which began in Canada on Friday, February 6th, when the Supreme Court struck down our law prohibiting assisted suicide. The CPSO is accepting submissions from all Ontario citizens concerning this unacceptable policy document until February 20th. We are all called to inform the CPSO in writing that we reject the proposed effective referral mandate for doctors whose charter right of freedom of conscience and religion must be respected. With this seminar and webinar today, medical professionals as well as experts in bioethics and law will give short presentations aimed at helping all of us send out our own submissions to the CPSO before the February 20th deadline, to inform them that the people of Ontario reject the effective referral mandate in the draft policy, and that together we stand in protection of the charter right of freedom of conscience and religion. Our first presenter here today will be Toronto lawyer and president of the Catholic Civil Rights League, Philip Horgan.
Thank you, Christian. Thanks, too, to the various presenters here today and sponsoring organizations, which include the Canadian Catholic Bioethics Institute and the St. Joseph Moscati Catholic Doctors Guild. I think the real value of this presentation, after some introductory remarks, is to hear from practitioners, from doctors in the field, addressing the kinds of concerns that they face and raising issues about what is the current CPSO policy or draft policy. For those who don't understand the significance of this, this is from Saturday's National Post regarding the Carter ruling from Friday, and I'm not sure if the tape can pick this up, but the headline in bold print says, "This ruling changes everything." And so in the context of that decision, which is mandating a one-year deadline for the review at various legislative levels and or within colleges across the country, this exercise being undertaken currently with the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario is upon us. The seminar today is not focused on the Carter decision, striking down the criminal code provisions against assisted suicide. But that decision certainly brings into sharper focus what is likely to happen in Ontario and other Canadian jurisdictions who are being told to revise their policies on these types of issues. The presentation today is to provide assistance to practitioners and the public on framing submissions that we hope you will be interested in making to the College in Ontario in the context of its policy deliberations. The exercise currently underway is a repeat of a similar engagement undertaken by the College of Physicians and Surgeons in 2008, when in the course of deliberations on these issues, the Ontario Human Rights Commission recommended then to the CPSO that physicians must essentially, quote, check their personal views at the door in providing medical care. The CPSO responded then, not unlike the situation we face in 2015, with a draft policy stating there will be times when it may be necessary for physicians to set aside their personal beliefs in order to ensure that patients or potential patients are provided with the medical treatment and services they require. Following significant public outcry and notably significant professional objections, that demand was eventually dropped. There are a number of changes proposed now in 2015. These originated in the summer of 2014 when a college working group released some discussion papers, and in fact, they've now put forward a draft policy as of December. The most contentious element in the draft policy that has been issued is a requirement that physicians who object to a procedure for reasons of conscience must help the patient find a colleague who will provide it, what they describe as an effective referral. Let's take a quick moment to review how this policy or proposed policy was developed. It appears to be based on the college documents, on a polling result obtained from May 2014, the details of which are not entirely laid out by the college, but is suggested to be representative of roughly 80% of the adult population of the province for those who use online or electronic systems. An immediate question to my way of thinking is, well, what about the 20% of Ontarians who may not have access to such systems, especially since they may be of the older generations? Nevertheless, the CPSO has admitted that in the previous consultation process from the summer of 2014, they received over 6,700 responses. Whether online or through other submissions, it's difficult to ascertain. They have admitted, though, that the overwhelming majority of responses supported freedom of conscience for physicians. And trying to work through the numbers, a colleague has suggested that roughly only 2% advocated a policy of mandatory referral. The online responses were a little more equivocal, but certainly suggested that this issue remains controversial. Notably, the Catholic Register, in its article of December 17, 2014, quoted Dr. Gabel, who is chair of the working group of the college, and I quote, "It may well be that you would have to think about whether you can practice family medicine as it is defined in Canada and in most of the Western countries." That article continued by stating, from Dr. Gabel's position, that there was plenty of room for conscientious Catholics in various medical specialties, but a moral objection to abortion and contraception would put family doctors on the wrong side of human rights legislation and current professional practice. It is our submission that the CPSO process appears to many as a secularist solution to a non-existent problem. It should be opposed. The proposal to coerce physicians into violating their consciences will inevitably erode their personal integrity, which forms the basis of the physician's professional relationship with their patients. In the words of Margaret Somerville, forcing physicians to act against their conscience, to do something they believe is deeply wrong against their will, not only harms them, but it harms their patients. This coercive violation of their freedom of conscience also harms society and the values that inform its culture. Certain questions could be asked. How many physicians will relocate rather than accept the imposition of morally objectionable standards? And what of authentic pluralism, where presumably we live with civil disagreement on matters of deeply held moral norms? Given the stated positions of the gatekeepers of the proposed policy, can we expect a fair hearing from the college in response to this further consultation process? It is my view that in the 2008 round, the college received hundreds of submissions and changed its mind. In this context, it is our view that the college will need to hear thousands of submissions in order to ensure that the conscience rights of physicians are observed. We certainly hope that the CPSO will take more meaningfully those conscience rights, and that is why the Catholic Civil Rights League has written to the College of Physicians and Surgeons opposing any change to the existing professional policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was Phil Horgan, President of the Catholic Civil Rights League. Our next speaker will be Dr. Moira McQueen. She's the Executive Director of the Canadian Catholic Bioethics Institute. Dr. Moira McQueen.
Thank you, Christian, and welcome to everybody here and to anyone who may be tuning in to listen to our presentations this afternoon. And as a moral theologian and bioethicist, my immediate concern in every moral issue really centres around the idea of conscience and where people stand on conscience. And although I'm a representative of a Catholic institution, I recognise that conscience is innate. The most valuable thing about conscience is that, as we know, every person with any capacity has a conscience. It just so happens that many of us form that conscience in many different ways. But the important point is, I believe, that up until the very near present time, conscience has been recognised in every single important legal charter, not just in Canada, but universally. So when we look at something like the Charter of Human Rights, when we look at documents from the United Nations, for example, when we even look at our own Canadian Charter of Rights, then we see that conscience is documented as something that is to be respected and to be upheld. And in that area, I think we have very much an area in which we can stress to the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario that conscience should continue to be so respected. There's very great precedent for doing so. I do encourage everybody when they make presentations to the CPSO to really stress that universal aspect of conscience, even if we do believe that in some areas that conscience right is being eroded. Even in law, I think it's very fair to say that there's never really a defence in terms of saying someone else made me do it. We're judged in what we actually did, in the circumstances in which we find ourselves. When it comes to the crunch, every one of us stands or falls on our own conscience decisions. And that's, again, an example of that innate universal quality that is conscience and why it's so important. And of course, it's also extremely important in Catholic teaching. Again, it's the foundation of our personal and, in fact, our church's morality. It's so important that in Section 16 of one of the documents from the Second Vatican Council, Gaudium et Spes, the Pastoral Constitution of the Church in the Modern World, that describes conscience as being the core of the person, the inner reality of the person, the area where the person is closest to God. The Council and these documents are of the highest ranking in Catholic official teaching because they come from that General Council. And they talk about conscience as being the sanctuary of the person. So it's no surprise to us that conscience is extremely highly valued. It is, as I said, at the basis of all our moral decisions. And Catholic teaching says that conscience is to be respected as long as we know, as it's an informed conscience, that it's made through consulting church teaching, by looking at other examples throughout the world, by looking at other people's ways of thinking. In fact, we don't ever really make a conscience decision purely on our own. We have to look at all the facts available, the evidence, if you like, as well as church teaching. But again, when the crunch comes, we make those decisions individually, and we stand or fall on that. That's why I find it so important when something comes along like this draft from the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario, and I know it's happening in Saskatchewan as well, when it talks about people saying, physicians in this case, who must refer, So even when it's clear that physicians are saying, on my conscience grounds, on well thought out rational grounds, and not just as some people say religious belief, as if religious belief sometimes is not well thought out on rational grounds too. But when people say that can be totally disregarded, and that someone is told, well, you can think what you like, but when it comes to the crunch, you must refer to somebody else who will go with the procedure. And this, to my mind, in this area and in all other areas of morality, must be resisted at all costs. And we need to let the college know this. I think we also need to let the Human Rights Commission of Ontario know this too. I feel very strongly that in these areas we need to let our MPPs and our MPs know as well, because all of these legislative bodies work together in many ways. And if we try to influence one, I think we should try to influence them all with our views. I was glad to see that the Canadian Medical Association, after the decision on Friday, is at least talking about protecting conscience rights for physicians. And in terms of the vote they had last summer, it seemed that the great majority of physicians are really concerned that conscience rights are being protected. If that is the case, then presumably physicians too are talking to the college that their conscience rights in all areas, and not just the euthanasia or physician-assisted suicide, but in all areas, must be upheld. And it's for those reasons that I have been urging people to contact the college. CCBI has been sending out information, not just recently, but beforehand. As Phil Horgan mentioned, this topic came up before, and the college did not go forward with what it was proposing then. I think the same thing can easily happen again. We have to be very clear that we object to conscience being overridden, that people are told that they must refer. And for this reason, I will certainly be sending my own message to the college stating all these facts and really encourage everybody to do the same.
Thank you very much, Moira. That was Dr. Moira McQueen, Executive Director of the Canadian Catholic Bioethics Institute. Our next series of presenters this afternoon will all be medical professionals who will state specifically how devastating the effective referral mandate would be to them in their practices. The first in these series is Dr. Pascal Bastien, who is a specialist in general internal medicine here in Toronto. Dr. Pascal Bastien.
Thank you. We are all familiar with the prevailing wisdom that medical school admission should not be based solely on the best grades or academic excellence, and we put a big emphasis on a deeper dedication to the service of others. That notion stems from the fact that good medicine is not simply a large pile of medical knowledge. It's not simply excellent scientific technique. A good clinician has to be, on one hand, a medical expert, and on the other hand, a conscientious caregiver. Under the elegant title, Professional Obligations and Human Rights, the CPSO is attempting to redefine integrity. If you plug integrity in Google, you'll find that online dictionaries tell you it is the state of being complete and whole. But for the CPSO revised dictionary, it would mean one's ability to separate your personal values on one hand and your professional actions on the other. Now, of course, the college doesn't actually want us, or want me, I think, to leave all of my values at home. I think they're still okay with me bringing compassion to the bedside. Perhaps they're also okay with me bringing patience or my listening skills to the bedside. But certainly they've decided that I may no longer bring the values that they have deemed obsolete or invalid to the bedside. Until now, in keeping with our pluralistic society, where people may have various opinions, but where we seek to have a peaceful functioning of society, the CPSO has allowed physicians, when they are in conflict with the actions that are required of them, to step aside. Naturally, our door is always open to all patients. Emphasis is placed, as it should be, on a respect of the patient's dignity, and every patient is treated with cordially, with respect, without belittling or condemnation of their various beliefs. The emphasis of this new policy, however, rests on the idea of a mandatory effective referral, and the CPSO is very clear by what they mean. They explain that they want a referral to a non-objecting available physician. There's a problem, however. The idea that a referral is not morally implicating is flawed. The CPSO itself believes that it is flawed. In fact, in its policies on other banned medical practices, it is very clear that it will sanction not only the physicians performing a banned procedure, but any physician referring for such procedures. As a specialist in general internal medicine, I am looking daily after a wide range of patients with end-stage heart failure, with advanced metastatic cancer, with end-stage Parkinson's, with devastating strokes. In my conversation with patients and their families, one of my main obstacles, or challenges, I should say, is around end-of-life care. Oftentimes, patients may feel when we bring up the notion of entering the dying phase, and when we are suggesting that perhaps heroic measures like intubation and CPR may not be in their best interest, they fear that perhaps we are in fact trying to get them to accept a passive euthanasia. There's a great deal of fear that physicians are not believing in the sanctity of life. And in these situations where the patient-physician relationship was broken, I've often been able to repair that relationship specifically by sharing that I also believed in this inherent sanctity of human life with my patients and their families. It would be naive to think that the only people who will be affected by the CPSO policy are the patients directly seeking morally questionable actions. In fact, it is the entire medical profession, and indeed the very fabric of the patient-physician relationship, that is being threatened if physicians are told to leave their values at the door. I want to make sure that you will understand my plea. My role as a physician is not to impose my views. It is not to use a privileged position to block or dissuade patients from getting physician-assisted suicide or euthanasia. In essence, however, I ask the same of the CPSO, not to impose their views on physicians and to allow me to practice while maintaining my moral integrity, allowing me not to become one of the cogwheels of the machine of euthanasia in my specialty. And that is why I have written to the College of Physicians and Surgeons opposing changes to our professional code. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Once again, that was Dr. Pascal Bastien. And it's my great pleasure now to introduce to you another physician. She's Dr. Maria Wolfs. Dr. Wolfs is assistant professor at the University of Toronto, as well as the staff endocrinologist at St. Michael's Hospital. Dr. Maria Wolfs.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As a medical educator, I foresee the CPSO draft policy as it stands would have a devastating effect on future and current physicians. The proposed mandate for effective referral goes contrary to two fundamental principles and pillars in the history of medical ethics and professionalism: the Hippocratic Oath and the tenet to do no harm. The Hippocratic Oath was developed centuries ago in response to a prevailing medical culture that even today we would find egregious. Physicians regularly took bribes, prescribed poisons, and had a power that was generally feared by the public. The public could not trust physicians with their health. Hippocrates and his followers proposed an oath aimed at establishing a new paradigm and reestablishing trust in physicians. Firstly, the oath was sworn under Apollo, acknowledging that a physician was answerable to a higher than human authority. It also forbade the giving of drugs, poisons, to end one's life, even life in the womb. A physician was called and became one who would heal and comfort and not harm. This was a paradigm shift and laid the foundation for medicine for centuries to come as we know it today. Another basic and fundamental tenet of medical professionalism is primum non nocere. First, do no harm. This is required because a physician is in a unique position with access to treatments and procedures that could cause harm, even death, and therefore must never do so. When a physician is asked, therefore, to prescribe a medication or perform a treatment which he or she knows may cause harm, the physician cannot do so. This decision is not based on discrimination against the person requesting this, but rather based on a rational evaluation of the consequences and the harms that such a procedure or treatment would cause. Refusal, rather than being discrimination, is actually a deep respect not only for the patient, but to honor the unique patient-physician relationship which is at the core of medical practice and professionalism. I want to emphasize that treatment refusals based on conscience are not mere personal beliefs, such as support for a political party or based on opinion polls. Conscience is an innate human faculty universally recognized as the core of a person's freedom and individuality, not a matter of public opinion. Freedom of conscience is therefore fundamental to the freedom of an individual and must be protected as an innate human right, both for patients and physicians. The CPSO draft's requirement for effective referral is an affront against this fundamental right. A patient's request for more medical treatments and procedures cannot override the moral harm that referral for such a procedure would cause for the physician. Such a referral is akin to cooperating with the treatment or procedure that the physician has found repugnant, and therefore creates a moral dualism within a physician that erodes his or her moral integrity. Effectively, the physician is forced to lie, and duplicity enters into the heart of the patient-physician relationship. The erosion of this integrity of the physician at his or her core moral level would have devastating consequences for patients and society at large. Once a physician goes against their fundamental core, the heart of their professional integrity is fractured. It follows that all of the core tenets of medical professionalism then become at risk. Honesty, integrity, justice, truth-telling. The loss of these would irreparably affect the patient-physician relationship forever. One of the wonderful aspects of being involved as a medical educator is to be daily exposed to and learn from the medical trainees from a variety of cultural and religious backgrounds. As the diversity of our patient population in Ontario increases, so should the diversity of physicians. This ensures that patients will receive culturally sensitive care. In order to ensure this diversity, we must be equally respectful and open to the personal values and beliefs of our current and future physicians. The University of Toronto Medical School, the largest in Canada, has existing ethics guidelines that support a trainee's right to refuse participation in activities for ethical reasons as a ground for their future practice. The CPSO must also continue to endorse that physicians not be compelled to provide what they discern are unethical services. This is why I have written to the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario to remove the mandate from their draft for effective referral. This way, and only in this way, will Ontario remain a culturally respectful and safe environment for patients and for physicians to learn and to serve them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Maria Wolfs. Our next presenter is Dr. Luigi Alexander Castagna. He is a pediatric neurologist. He is also the director of Developmental Screening Clinic and chairman of the Research and Ethics Board. He's the staff pediatrician at the Scarborough Hospital. We welcome this afternoon Dr. Luigi Alexander Castagna.
Thank you, Christian. Good afternoon. I think my colleagues who have preceded me have eloquently shown directly and indirectly how the practice of medicine is really the art of healing. Now, we understand healing as the restoration of integrity of mind and body when it has been undermined by an injury or a disease process. We all know that science, evidence, technological skills are essential foundations in the art of healing. But as my colleagues pointed out, it is the relationship between the doctor and the patient based on trust that is the real fulcrum, the focus of healing. And the physician earns this trust from the patient by an ongoing dialogue, open, honest, in which he reveals himself as who he is and or she is, and where the patient can be convinced, reassured about his ongoing willingness to look after his interests, about his well-being, and his refusal to do harm. Now, the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario feels that patients might be in danger under certain circumstances not to receive the care they wish. This concern, I think, is not relevant if you look at the actual clinical practice. And I think it refers a model of doctor-patient interaction which is more one of customer service and not one of professional interaction. And I'd like to make two examples, hypothetical examples of patients I might see in my practice. I've seen several cases of this sort to illustrate my point. Let's say I've followed a patient since childhood for a chronic condition, and she's now an adolescent girl. She's over 16. She can make her own decisions, and in a consent, and requests a prescription for birth control pill for the purpose of contraception. I would, in my practice, go on as I would with any other patient. I would determine what her circumstances are, review the state of her general health, her current treatment, and counsel her on the interactions between birth control and other interventions, other treatments, pharmacological treatments. I would review potential adverse effects. But if I didn't add one more important aspect, I would not be completely open and honest and really not provide the entire picture to inform her in this matter. Namely, the question of whether the prescription of a birth control pill is really a healing act. Are we actually restoring something to normal function, which has been undermined by disease process? Or are we, in fact, through this intervention, undermining a healthy physiological process? Is this not, rather than a medical act, is this not instead the enabling through biotechnology of personal social choice, the choice of having sexual intercourse with no likelihood of pregnancy, and if so desired, perhaps even having sexual intercourse without the need for commitment or even personal or emotional closeness. These kind of points would trigger a discussion, open and supportive, sympathetic. And my experience is that inevitably my teenage patients appreciate that. They appreciate speaking to an adult who seems to be speaking out of his heart, and not hide himself behind the veil of institutional or societal propriety. A second example is that of a patient I would have followed for several years again, but now is a young woman who has found herself unintendedly pregnant and would like to have an abortion. I would address this issue exactly the same way, sympathetically, supportively, non-judgmentally, and exploring this young woman's circumstances. But there is an additional dimension here. That is, if you actually carry out an abortion, there is a definitive, undeniable, irreversible harm done to the fetus. And I understand the fetus as being a human being in an early stage of development. And this is not a piece of theoretical knowledge. I'm a pediatrician. I have worked with very, very small premature newborns. I have also examined, sadly, fetuses who have been aborted or miscarried. And I can tell you for a fact that these are human beings who are developing. And my call is to promote this development, ensure its effective progress, not to terminate it. I would clearly mention these issues in a way that's non-judgmental, not to threaten my patient or to make her feel uncomfortable, but to point out certain realities. And I would also quite clearly state that this is something I could not refer her for the stated reasons. Again, in my practice, I have never found a negative reaction to this kind of open discussion. On the contrary, whether the patient would eventually carry out her original intent, or whether, on the other hand, she decided to heed my advice, in either cases, the therapeutic relationship continued. I continued to be able to serve this patient well in other areas of care. If anything, the relationship was strengthened, became more authentic, and the trust deepened because of reciprocal honesty. I don't think this is a difficult thing to do for a physician. We constantly form ourselves, we cultivate the ability to treat everybody without judgment. And this is why I really support the CPSO in one point of the draft policy, namely that we should not discriminate in accepting patients based on their age or their level of abilities, the complexity of their disease, their lifestyle, or even on the way they experience their sexuality. We should accept everybody as long as we are competent in taking care of them. I do, however, strongly disagree with their proposal that we should be providing an effective referral, that is, referring a patient to another practitioner when we think this referral will do that patient harm. Not only would we cause harm knowingly by following this directive, which is institutional, it's external, it's a third party interfering with the patient-doctor relationship. We would also undermine the trust we have with from our patients in our patient relationship. A physician who would continue to be committed to a genuine patient-doctor relationship, committed to the interests of his patients and his well-being, would find himself possibly disciplined by the college. This cannot possibly benefit our patients as individuals or as a group. And this is why I disagree, and I feel that strongly that the CPSO, who is trying to protect patients, in this case is actually undermining their safety and well-being. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Luigi. That was Dr. Luigi Alexander Castagna. Our next presenter is Helen McGee. She's an advanced practice nurse. Let us welcome Helen McGee.
I've always worked as a nurse on healthcare teams that respect diversity. Sorry. Oh, to hold it. Thank you. I've always worked as a nurse on healthcare teams that respect diversity. If I were assigned the care of a patient who has a medication or procedure that I can't provide for reasons of conscience, I would continue to provide nursing care to her and alert my team that I couldn't provide the treatment as soon as the ethical dilemma arose. However, I wouldn't make an effective referral to a colleague the way the CPSO draft recommends. It proposes that doctors with values like mine would face disciplinary measures if they don't make that effective referral. Like the Carter decision that was delivered on Friday, 2 days ago, the CPSO draft places higher priority on patient autonomy than it does on the principle of respect for a person's life. I'm concerned about this proposal because other professional colleges, like mine, may make similar proposals for effective referral. The requirement for effective referral is intended to provide patients with timely access to procedures, but I think that coercing physicians, and in my case nurses, to act against conscience places patients at risk. We need healthcare providers who think clearly, free of intimidation, because their attention to ethical dilemmas protects us. And I think we all do, ethical decision-making in our healthcare providers as much as we value their compassion and expertise. In my specialty of mental health, a patient's desire for death can be overwhelming in various clinical presentations, whether it's bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, or severe depression, trauma. My role, though, is to hold hope and maintain safety until the person responds to treatment, instead of acting on his expressed desire to end his suffering. I'm aware of having saved at least one person's life by not endorsing his autonomous decision that life was not worth living. In another example, I once visited a boy who had stopped breathing in the recovery room after he had his tonsils out. The boy has cerebral palsy and will never walk or speak more than a few words. During the visit, I heard a nurse tell the oncoming team that his mom wanted a full resuscitation. The underlying message I heard was that his disability could have led the team to make a different choice. The team did resuscitate him and he's thriving. However, he might have died from a temporary problem unrelated to his disability if someone in the room had not looked beyond quality of life and loved him enough to insist on the fundamental value of his life. I've written to the CPSO because when legal constraints against life-ending procedures disappear, teams consider them as normal practice, the way we do things here. And the comment you'll get when you make an objection for reasons of conscience is, that issue is settled. In this situation, and that's the culture we're entering, individual responsibility for ethical reasoning is even more important than ever. That's why I encourage you to write a letter to the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario to object to their proposal for mandatory effective referral. Thank you.
That was advanced practice nurse Helen McGee, and we thank her for her presentation, as we thank all of our presenters here today. Once again, we thank the St. Joseph Moscati Toronto Catholic Doctors Guild. We thank the CCBI, in particular for hosting us in their offices here in Toronto, and for providing us with the means to reach out electronically. Now, I've appealed to those people who have joined us in the webinar to tweet in their questions, as I've been live tweeting, and also they may send in any questions by email for further follow-up at ccrl@ccrl.ca. If there were any issues with audio or with production aspects of the presentation, we will get those cleaned up, and we will be putting the entirety of it, as well as the individual presentations, on our website, which is, once again, www.ccrl.ca. We thank the Archdiocese of Toronto for having publicized this session in parish bulletins and via other electronic means of communication for the many Catholic organizations who have aided us in spreading the word. In fact, the Canadian Conference of Catholic Bishops also retweeted publicity for this live and electronically transmitted event here today. We, the citizens of Ontario, have until February 20th to inform the CPSO that we reject their effective referral mandates. We at the Catholic Civil Rights League, the CCRL, have a dedicated area to this on our website, as I've mentioned, committed to making this process as efficient but also as effective as possible, and as numerous as possible the interventions through the submissions must be. Please do visit ccrl.ca to find out how you can indeed send a submission to the CPSO and stand up for physicians' freedom of conscience and religion. Thank you very much, and God bless.